Some stories are whispered on the wind, tales of hope that emerge from the most desperate of places. This is one of those stories, a testament to the fact that miracles can happen anywhere, even in a withered field under a merciless sun. If you believe in the power of faith, you're in the right place. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single one of our stories about the extraordinary hidden within the ordinary. The dirt didn't just crack, it shattered. Each fissure was a tiny, dry canyon splitting the heart of Samuel Jenkins' world. He stood at the edge of his cornfield, a 60-acre testament to failure, and felt the last of his hope drain into the parched earth. The sky wasn't just blue, it was a hard-baked cerulean bowl, devoid of clouds, devoid of mercy. It was the third year of the drought, and this year it had finally won. The crops weren't just struggling, they were dead. Brittle, brown skeletons of cornstalks whispered a cruel, dry rattle in the faintest breeze, a sound that had become the soundtrack to Samuel's despair. Hope was a currency Samuel Jenkins had run out of. It had been slowly spent over years of watching the weather reports with a frantic heart, of praying for rain that came too little or too late, of taking out loans against land that had been in his family for 4 generations. The bank's last letter was folded in the pocket of his worn jeans, its crisp, official words feeling like a brand against his thigh. Final notice. Foreclosure proceedings. The words echoed in his skull. The farm wasn't just his livelihood, it was his identity, his heritage, his father's legacy. And he was the one who was going to lose it. The town of Jasper, population 1203, was a place you'd blink and miss on the long, straight highway cutting through the Midwest. It was a grid of quiet streets named after trees and presidents, flanked by sturdy, if slightly weary, clapboard houses. Its lifeblood was the land, and the land was dying. You could feel the collective anxiety like a low hum beneath the surface of everyday life. It was in the way folks at the town's only diner, the sizzling skillet, lingered over their coffee a little longer, avoiding talk of the future. It was in the worried frown of old man Henderson at the hardware store as he stocked more seed than anyone would buy. It was in the silent, stoic prayers offered up on Sunday mornings at St. Mary's, the small Catholic church on Oak Street, where Father Patrick Michael's homilies increasingly revolved around the theme of endurance. Some stories are whispered on the wind, tales of hope that defy explanation. This is one of them, an account of a miracle that bloomed in the dust of despair. If you believe in the power of faith, the kindness of strangers, or simply a mystery that can't be solved, you've come to the right place. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single story that reminds us of the wonder in our world. The earth was cracked and bleeding dust. That was the first thing anyone noticed about Samuel Teague's farm that summer. It was a wound in the heart of Kansas, 120 acres of pure, unadulterated despair. The second thing you noticed was Sam himself, a big man made hollow, standing at the edge of his dead field like a sentinel guarding a tomb. He'd just received the final notice from the bank in Wichita, a crisp, white envelope that felt like a death warrant in his calloused hands. The debt was a mountain he could no longer even see the top of, and his faith, once as solid and dependable as the old oak by the farmhouse, was now just a splintered thing, barely clinging to the soil of his soul. The town of Cedar Spring, population 1,482, was a place where the horizon was a straight line, and a man's worth was measured by the yield of his land and the strength of his handshake. It was a grid of quiet streets, named after trees and presidents, surrounding a single stoplight that mostly blinked yellow. The air always smelled of 2 things: earth and diesel. Everyone knew everyone, and everyone knew Sam Teague was on the ropes. You could see it in the way he'd stare a little too long at his coffee down at the Main Street diner, in the way his shoulders, once broad enough to carry a 100-pound sack of grain without a grunt, were now perpetually slumped. His wife, Eleanor, still held her head high, a quiet, stubborn pride in her eyes, but the worry lines around them had deepened into permanent creases this past year. Their son, Ben, just 16, had stopped talking about college altogether. The drought had been cruel, a relentless, sun-bleached monster that had settled over the Great Plains and refused to leave. It wasn't just Sam, the whole region was gasping. But Sam's fields, for reasons the old-timers at the co-op couldn't quite figure, had been hit the worst. The corn was a brittle, brown graveyard, stalks snapping if you so much as breathed on them. The promised rain clouds on the weather app were perpetual liars, vanishing before they could offer a single drop of mercy. The land was parched, the credit was gone, and the hope had run out. It was on a Thursday evening, the heat still shimmering off the ground like a ghost, that it began. Sam was walking the fence line, not because it needed mending, but because he couldn't bear to sit in the silent house and see the fear in Eleanor's eyes. The sky was turning a bruised purple and orange. That's when he saw it. A light. Not a star, not the distant glow of a plane. This was low, in the very center of his withered field, a soft golden glow that seemed to pulse gently, like a heartbeat. He figured it was a trick of the light, his tired eyes playing games. He rubbed them with his thumb and forefinger, but the light remained. It didn't flicker like a flame. It was steady, warm, and impossibly peaceful. A strange feeling settled over him, a stillness that was alien after months of churning anxiety. He felt no fear, only a profound, heavy curiosity. He took a step forward, the dry soil crunching under his boots, then another. He was drawn to it, a moth to a celestial flame. He was maybe 50 yards away when the light began to shift, to coalesce. It wasn't just light anymore, it was a form, the form of a woman, draped in robes that seemed woven from the light itself. She was facing away from him, and the air around her shimmered, hazy and beautiful. Sam stopped dead, his breath catching in his throat. This wasn't a trick, this was something else. His mind, a practical, Midwestern mind that believed in seed and soil and sweat, scrambled for an explanation. A prank, a hologram. But there was no one out here for miles, and then, as if hearing the thunderous beat of his heart, the figure turned. He didn't see a face, not clearly. It was obscured by a radiance so loving, so immense, that it felt like looking directly into the heart of grace itself. He felt a wave of warmth wash over him, a warmth that had nothing to do with the lingering summer heat. It was a warmth that seeped into his bones, melting the icy dread that had taken root there. He fell to his knees, not in prayer, but in pure, overwhelmed awe. He didn't hear words, but a message was imparted directly into his spirit, a feeling more than a sound. Do not be afraid. All will be well. He didn't know how long he knelt there. It could have been a minute. It could have been an hour. When he finally looked up, the figure was gone. The field was dark, the only light coming from the rising moon. But something was different. The air itself felt different, cleaner, charged. Sam got to his feet, his body trembling. He stumbled back to the house, his mind reeling. Eleanor met him at the door, her face etched with fresh concern. "Sam, what is it? You're white as a sheet." He tried to form the words. I saw something, Ellie, in the field." "A fire? Coyotes?" she asked, her practical nature taking over. He shook his head, his voice a raspy whisper. "No, it was a woman. She was light." The words sounded insane even to his own ears. Eleanor's face softened with pity. She guided him to a chair, her hand on his arm. "It's the stress, Sam. It's this heat. You're exhausted. You're not sleeping." She made him a cup of tea, her movements brisk and worried. Sam didn't argue. He knew how it sounded. He drank the tea, his hands shaking so badly the china cup rattled in its saucer. He went to bed, but he didn't sleep. He just stared at the ceiling, replaying the vision over and over in his mind. Do not be afraid. All will be well. Samuel was a man of simple, quiet faith. He believed in the solid feel of soil under his boots, the value of hard work, and a God who listened. But lately, his prayers felt like they hit the ceiling and fell, dusty and unanswered, back to the floor. His wife, Clara, with her gentle hands and endless patience, still set a plate for him every night, but the silence at their kitchen table was heavy, filled with things they couldn't bring themselves to say. Their daughter Emily, away at college, had called last week, her voice tight with concern she tried to mask. "It'll rain, Dad. It has to." Samuel had just grunted, his throat too thick with a fear he couldn't name to form a proper reply. That evening, he couldn't bear the four walls of the house, the sympathetic look in Clara's eyes. He walked out into the field, the crunch of dead corn under his boots, a sound of utter defeat. The sun was setting, painting the sky in fiery shades of orange and purple, a cruel, beautiful mockery of the day's heat. He sank to his knees, the hard earth punishing them, and finally let the tears come. They were not gentle tears, but great, heaving sobs that tore from a place deep inside him, a place of ruin and shame. He wasn't just crying for the farm, he was crying for the failure he felt he was, for letting down his father, his grandfather, his wife, his daughter. "I've got nothing left," he whispered, his voice raw and broken, swallowed by the immense empty landscape. "Nothing. I don't know what to do. I've tried everything. My faith, it's just gone." He didn't know how long he knelt there, emptied out, hollow as the stalks around him. The fiery sunset began to bleed into the deep indigo of twilight. The first stars, cold and distant, pricked the sky. And that's when he felt it. A change. The oppressive, heavy heat began to lift, not by a wind, but by a gentle, cool stillness that settled over the field. The dry, dusty air, which always carried the scent of despair, suddenly changed. It was filled with a fragrance Samuel couldn't place. It was sweet, like rain-washed earth and blooming roses, and something else, something ancient and holy. A profound peace, a feeling he had not known for years, wrapped around him like a blanket. He looked up, wiping his eyes with the back of a calloused hand. And he saw her. At the far end of the field, where the irrigation ditch had long since run dry, a light began to form. It wasn't the harsh electric light of a barn lamp, nor was it the cool light of the moon. It was a soft, golden living light, warm and tender. It coalesced, shimmering, and within its heart a figure took shape. She was standing amidst the dead corn, a woman of impossible beauty and overwhelming kindness. She seemed to be made of light itself, her robes flowing in a breeze that did not stir a single leaf on the dead stalks around her. A mantle of deep blue, the color of a twilight sky, draped over her head and shoulders. Her hands were clasped gently in front of her, and her face was one of such profound compassion and sorrow that Samuel felt a fresh wave of tears. But these were different. They were tears of recognition, of a burden being shared, of a love so immense it could hold all his pain. He knew. He didn't know how, but he knew. He was on his knees, not in despair anymore, but in awe. She didn't speak with a voice that came to his ears. The words formed directly in his mind, clear and soft as a bell. "Do not be afraid, Samuel. Your prayers have been heard. This land thirsts, but a greater thirst is in the hearts of men. Have faith. The water of life will come, and it will bring healing. Tell them to believe." She smiled then, a smile that held the warmth of a million suns, and raised a hand, not in greeting but in blessing, sweeping it slowly over the field. Then, as gently as she had appeared, the light began to fade, drawing inward until it was a single, brilliant point, and then it was gone. Samuel was left in the sudden, profound darkness, the only sound his own thundering heart. The sweet fragrance still hung in the air. He was trembling, every sense screaming that what he had witnessed was real. He scrambled to his feet, his knees protesting, and stumbled back toward the farmhouse, his mind reeling. He burst through the kitchen door, his face ashen, his eyes wide. Clara was at the sink, and she turned, a question dying on her lips when she saw him. "Sam? Sam, what is it? You look like you've seen a ghost." He collapsed into a kitchen chair, his hands shaking so badly he couldn't still them. "Not a ghost," he breathed, the words tumbling out. "Clara, I saw the Blessed Mother, in the field. She was there. She spoke to me." Clara stared at him, her dish towel frozen in her hand. Her first thought was not of miracles, but of heat stroke, of a mental break brought on by the stress. She rushed to him, feeling his forehead. "Sam, you're ice cold. Let me get you some water. You've been under too much—" "No," he said, his voice stronger now, filled with a conviction that startled her. He grabbed her hands. "Clara, listen to me. I was on my knees. I was crying. I had given up. And then there was this light, this smell, like flowers and rain. And she was there. She was real. She said, 'Our prayers have been heard.' She said, the water of life will come. She told me to tell everyone to believe." He was so earnest, so utterly transformed from the broken man who had walked out the door an hour before. The despair in his eyes had been replaced by a blazing, unshakable light. Clara, a practical woman, felt a shiver go down her spine. She had never seen her husband like this. He was a man of facts, of soil yields and equipment maintenance. He wasn't given to visions. "Okay, Sam," she said softly, her nurse's training taking over. "Okay, let's just sit for a minute." But Samuel couldn't sit. He was energized, filled with a purpose that burned away his fatigue. He had to tell someone. He grabbed his old truck keys. "I have to go see Father Michael." Father Patrick Michael was a young priest, only 5 years out of the seminary, and he often felt the weight of his collar heavily in a town like Jasper, where faith was deep but often silent. He was reading in his small study when a frantic knocking came at the rectory door. He opened it to find Samuel Jenkins, wild-eyed and breathless. "Father, I have to talk to you." "Samuel, come in. What's happened?" Samuel poured out his story again, the words rushing out in a torrent. Father Michael listened patiently, his expression neutral, but internally his mind was racing. As a priest, he was a custodian of the miraculous, a believer in divine intervention. But he was also a man of the modern world, trained to be cautious, to investigate, to discern. Visions were not something to be taken lightly. "Samuel," he said gently when the farmer had finished, "what you're describing, it's a very powerful experience. The stress you've been under, the heat, the mind can play tricks." Samuel's face fell, but the light in his eyes didn't dim. "It wasn't a trick, Father. It was real. I know it was. She told me to tell you, to tell everyone, to have faith." Father Michael sighed. "Faith is what we must hold on to, Samuel, but we must also be prudent. Let's keep this between us for now. Pray on it. I will pray with you. But secrets are hard to keep in a town the size of Jasper." The next morning, Hank Miller, who owned the adjacent farm, was out early checking his own sorry-looking fields. He saw the footprints leading into Samuel's dead cornfield, a path beaten down to one particular spot. He saw the look on Samuel S.'s face when he came out to get the mail, a look of serene joy that was completely out of place. Hank, a skeptic of the highest order, mentioned it to his wife, who mentioned it to her friend at the post office, who told the waitress at the sizzling skillet. By noon, a low buzz had started through the town. Old Sam Jenkins finally cracked under the pressure, says he saw the Virgin Mary in his cornfield. The tone was a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. But then something else happened. Lily Henderson, the hardware store owner's 8-year-old granddaughter, was riding her bike past the Jenkins farm that afternoon. She was a bright, imaginative child who loved the stories of saints her grandmother told her. She braked her bike, peering through the rusty wire fence at the dead field. She'd heard the whispers at the diner. "I dare you to go in," her friend Billy said, but he wouldn't follow. Lily, spurred by a courage she didn't know she had, slipped through a gap in the fence and walked a few yards into the field. She stood where her grandfather said Sam Jenkins had been kneeling. She didn't see a lady made of light, but she felt it, the same profound peace, and she smelled it, the impossible, sweet fragrance of roses in a place where nothing had bloomed for months. She started to cry, not out of sadness, but out of a feeling of being completely and utterly loved. She ran home, breathless, telling her stunned parents, "I felt her. I felt the beautiful lady. She's sad for the corn." A child's testimony carries a different weight. The pitying whispers began to change, tinged with something else, unease, wonder. The next day, a few more people came. They were drawn by a curiosity they couldn't explain. They stood at the edge of the field, hesitant. Marge Evans, who'd lost her husband to cancer the year before, ventured in. She stood silently for a long time, then came out, her face streaked with tears. "I felt him," she whispered to a friend. "I felt John's presence. It was like forgiveness, like peace. I haven't felt that since he passed." Then old Mrs. Gable, who hadn't been to church in 20 years, went. She came out and announced to the small gathering, "I don't know about any virgin, but something's in that field, something good." Father Michael, watching from the rectory window, saw the small trickle of people become a steady stream. He felt a growing responsibility. He couldn't ignore it anymore. He called the diocese, his voice nervous. The bishop's secretary was polite but dismissive. "Visions in cornfields, Father Michael. Use your best judgment. Be a calming presence. Encourage prayer, but do not encourage fanaticism." That evening, Father Michael went to the field himself. The sun was setting again. A small group of 24 townspeople had gathered at the fence line, speaking in hushed tones. Samuel was among them, quiet, his face still holding that unearthly calm. Father Michael walked past them, into the dead corn. The air was cool. He smelled nothing but dust. He felt nothing but a deep sadness for his struggling flock, desperately seeking hope. He knelt and prayed for guidance, for wisdom. He felt nothing out of the ordinary. He walked back to the group, his heart heavy. "My friends," he said, his voice carrying in the twilight, "let us not seek signs and wonders. Let us seek God in our hearts, in our community. Let us go home and pray together in church." The crowd murmured, disappointed. They began to disperse. Samuel looked at the priest, not with anger, but with a deep, unshakable patience. "She said to have faith, Father." That night, the weather forecast, which everyone in Jasper watched with a kind of masochistic obsession, showed no change, no rain, just more sun, more heat. But in the deepest part of the night, a wind picked up. It wasn't the hot, dusty wind they were used to. It was a cool wind, smelling of distant rain. It rattled the windows of the farmhouses. Samuel woke up and went to the window. He looked out at his field, his heart pounding with a wild, impossible hope. The next morning, the world had changed. It was Billy, Lily's friend, who first saw it, delivering newspapers from his bike. He dropped his bike in the middle of the road and stared, his mouth agape. He ran home, screaming for his mum. People poured out of their houses following the boy's pointing finger. Where Samuel Jenkins's field had been a uniform, dead brown, there was now a circle of vibrant emerald green. Right in the center of the field, exactly where Samuel had knelt, Exactly where others had reported feeling peace, the corn was alive. It wasn't just alive, it was thriving, stalks tall and strong, tassels waving in the morning breeze, a shocking oasis of life in a desert of death. And at the very center of that circle of green, a single perfect white rosebush grew, covered in blooms, its sweet fragrance carried on the wind, perfuming the entire area. There was no explanation. It was impossible. The soil was just as dry there as everywhere else. There was no water source. It was a miracle, an undeniable physical miracle. The news didn't just spread through town. It exploded. Cars and trucks began lining the highway. People from 3 counties over came to see the miracle of Jasper. The local news stations sent a crew. The reporter, a slick-haired man from the city, stood in front of the green circle, a smirk on his face as he talked about mass hysteria and a clever hoax to drum up tourism. He interviewed Hank Miller, the skeptic. Hank, however, looked shaken. He stood before the camera, his hat in his hands, staring at the green corn. I don't know what to say," the normally gruff farmer stammered. "I've farmed this land my whole life. I've never seen anything like it. That corn was dead, stone dead. We all saw it. There's no water. There's no reason for this. It's something else." The reporter's smirk faded. He interviewed Marge Evans, who spoke through tears of the peace she found. He interviewed little Lily, who described the beautiful lady with the kind of certainty only a child possesses. The segment, which was supposed to be a quirky human interest piece, ended up feeling strangely solemn. The diocese called Father Michael again. This time it was the bishop himself. His tone was no longer dismissive. "We are sending a team, Patrick, to investigate." The scientific team arrived, a soil scientist, a botanist, a hydrologist. They took samples, they measured, they scanned. They were thorough, clinical, and deeply confused. Their initial findings, reported to a hushed crowd gathered outside the field, made no sense. The soil in the green circle was identical in composition and moisture level to the dead soil 3 feet away. The corn itself was genetically the same strain Samuel had planted. There was no hidden aquifer, no chemical anomaly. The white rose was a variety not native to North America. The lead scientist, a woman not given to mystical thinking, concluded, "There is no scientific explanation for this phenomenon based on our current data. The growth is unprecedented." Their words, "no scientific explanation," became a mantra for the growing number of pilgrims. They came by the hundreds now, not just from the Midwest, but from all over the country. They stood at the fence, praying, crying, seeking hope. A woman in a wheelchair was helped to the edge of the green circle by her family. She touched one of the green leaves and began to weep, claiming a pain she'd had for years had vanished. A man, who later told reporters he was an atheist, said he came to scoff, but left in silence, unable to explain the overwhelming feeling of peace that came over him. The town of Jasper was transformed. The sizzling skillet was doing a booming business. The hardware store sold out of bottled water and cameras, but it was more than an economic boost. The cynicism that had taken root during the drought began to wither, replaced by a renewed sense of community and shared wonder. People talked to each other again, not about the weather, but about hope. They gathered in the evenings at the field, not as Gawkers, but as a congregation without walls. Father Michael, humbled and awed, began to lead rosaries at the site. He stopped trying to explain it and started simply embracing it. He saw the faith of his parish and his own faith renewed and deepened in ways he never thought possible. Samuel Jenkins paid off his debts. The first bushel of miraculous corn was sold at auction for a staggering sum, donated to the church to start a fund for struggling farmers in the region. He never became a televangelist or a celebrity. He remained just Sam, the farmer, now with a light in his eyes that never went out. He could often be found sitting on a stool near the fence, quietly talking to those who came, Not about the vision, but about faith. It's not about seeing something, he'd say. It's about believing in something you can't always see. The miracle wasn't a one-time event. The circle of green remained, defying every season. The rosebush never wilted, even in the deepest snow. And the following spring, the rains came. Not the torrential, damaging floods, but gentle, steady, life-giving rains that soaked the earth and ended the drought for everyone. Scientists would study the Jasper anomaly for years, always coming to the same inconclusive result. The faithful needed no data. They had the testimony of a broken farmer, a hopeful child, and a grieving widow. They had the undeniable evidence of life conquering death in a circle of green. The event faded from national headlines, as such things do, but it never left the heart of the community. Jasper became a quiet destination for pilgrims, a place where people could go to remember that even in the most barren landscapes of our lives, hope can take root in the most unexpected ways. The field stands to this day, a patch of vibrant green amidst the golden waves of normal corn, a permanent scar of the holy on the land, a testament to a night when the heavens, moved by the faith of one desperate man, touched the earth and left it forever changed. It serves as a quiet, haunting reminder that miracles are not always about defying the laws of nature, but about fulfilling the deepest law of all, the law of love that can bring life from dust and hope from despair. Thank you for joining me on this journey to a small field in Jasper, a reminder that light often shines brightest against the darkest of backdrops. If this story touched your heart, please let us know by liking this video. And if you believe in the power of the unexplained, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for more stories that explore the miraculous threads woven into the fabric of our everyday world.